Hey everyone, welcome back. We're all about getting to the good stuff quickly, right? So today we're taking a deep dive into something super fascinating, how being alone can actually unlock your creativity.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting source material here, and our mission is to pull out those golden nuggets, practical stuff you can actually use, whether you're a painter or a programmer or whatever.
Exactly. No matter what your creative jam is, we're hoping this deep dive gives you something to chew on. So we're going to be looking at five main areas, right? Like how to structure your creative time, how important it is to embrace the journey, not just the end result.
Right.
And then we'll get into how solitude can really recharge your batteries. And then kind of the interplay between being alone and finding inspiration. And then finally, why it's so important to actually celebrate your creative journey, to really acknowledge how far you've come. Sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing that really jumped out at me from the source material was this idea of treating your creative practice like a cherished ritual. I mean, how do we actually apply that?
Well, it sounds a bit woo-woo, I know, but it's really about consistency. It's about making a commitment to your creative work, kind of like setting up a date with yourself,
Yeah.
like you would with anything else that's important to you. And what's fascinating is by actually scheduling time for your creative work, you're tapping into the power of habit formation, which is something our brains are wired to do. So it becomes less of this, oh, I should create something, and more of, okay, it's 3 p.m., this is my creative time.
I see. It becomes more of a routine thing instead of this thing you got to force yourself to do.
Exactly.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then building on that, there's this idea of embracing the creative process, not just the outcome. Because I think a lot of us, we get so focused on the end goal, like, oh, I want to write this song or I want to finish this painting, that we forget about the actual journey, right?
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the magic happens. The source material really emphasizes that every creative endeavor is an opportunity to experiment, to learn, and to grow. And honestly, sometimes those mistakes or detours lead to the most interesting results.
And then you say that because I remember, I think it was last year I was working on this animation project, and it was just like not working. Like I was getting so frustrated, but then I just started playing around with different techniques, just kind of messing around, and that's actually how I stumbled upon this whole new style that I've been using ever since.
That's a perfect example, and that's what the source material is encouraging, to release that pressure of perfection and just allow yourself to enjoy the process.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then we get into the role of solitude, which is obviously a key theme here. And I think it's important to note that solitude doesn't just mean being physically alone, right? It's also about creating this mental space where you can really disconnect from the noise and the demands of the world.
Absolutely. It's about giving yourself that mental break, that time to recharge and reflect. And what's interesting is the source material talks about how this recharging is actually crucial for enhancing creative flow.
So it's not just about like resting, it's actually about feeding your creativity.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button for your mind so you can come back to your work with fresh eyes and renewed energy.
Yeah, I think a lot of us underestimate the importance of just like taking a break.
For sure.
Okay, now here's where things get a little tricky, right? Because we're talking about solitude, but we also need inspiration, right? And inspiration often comes from external sources, interacting with people, experiencing new things, that sort of thing. So how do we balance these two seemingly opposing needs?
That's a great question. And the source material offers a pretty interesting perspective on this. It talks about a kind of rhythm, a back and forth between immersing yourself in the world, soaking up inspiration, and then retreating into solitude to process and interpret what you've gathered.
So like going out in the world to gather those raw materials and then coming back to your solitary space to like shape them into something unique.
Exactly. And it's in that solitary space where you're free from distractions and outside influences that your unique perspective can really shine through. That's where those raw materials become something truly original. Sometimes you might even find those initial sparks within communities like LPot, but it's often that solitary processing where those ideas really take shape and become something unique to you.
That's such an important point, how that individual interpretation really transforms inspiration into something truly original. Okay, and then finally, we have this idea of celebrating the creative journey, which might seem a bit, I don't know, self-congratulatorial, but it's actually much deeper than that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's about recognizing that creativity is an ongoing process, a marathon, not a sprint. And it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind and lose sight of how far we've come.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely guilty of that.
But taking the time to look back and acknowledge your progress, to celebrate those little victories, it's a powerful way to fuel your motivation and inspire you to keep going.
It's almost like giving yourself a little pat on the back, like, hey, you're doing great, keep it up.
Exactly. And it reinforces that the journey itself is valuable, not just the destination.
I love that. Okay, so to recap, we've talked about structuring our creative time, embracing the creative process, the importance of recharging through solitude, that back and forth between external inspiration and solitary processing, and finally, celebrating our progress.
And all of this really highlights the power of being alone, how it can unlock a different level of creativity.
Absolutely. So as you go about your week, think about this. What if you intentionally carved out even just a small pocket of solitude each day? How might that impact your creative process? What new ideas might surface in that quiet space? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.